France had major wars between Catholics and Protestants within its own borders, but eventually the Catholics started running out of kings. So the Protestants won by default with Henri IV, or Henry of Navarre. Now, France was still full of Catholics, and a lot of people tried getting him to convert, but he said, nah, I'm the king, I can do what I want. And everyone was way too tired to question it. And thus starts the reign of House Bourbon, staying Protestant but passing the Edict of Nantes. So now France has a Protestant Calvinist king, but with this act, giving equal rights to both Protestants and Catholics, even marrying the sister of the previous three kings to lock down that legitimacy. But it didn't really work out between the two. So the two divorced 10 years earlier than if they were Catholic still. So Harry married Mary of Nassau, giving an alliance to the basically king of the Netherlands. But the Catholics were still not happy, so they assassinated Henry. So his 14-year-old son became Louis XIII. But meanwhile, in Holy Roman German Empire, the same thing was going on between Protestants and Catholics. So in 1629, France ended up joining, and along with Gustav Adolphus from Sweden, they ended up kicking the Catholics' asses. So by 1634, it led to Protestants dominating Europe, the French taking the Spanish Netherlands and Burgundy. The Palatinate became an elector count again, meaning that the majority of the electors of the Roman Emperor is now Protestant. Charles I Louis of the Palatinate also inherits the Kingdom of Bohemia. The Netherlands get their independence, Sweden and Brandenburg expand and break. But to keep the peace, Louis marries the daughter of the King of Spain, and his sister marries the next King of Spain, as well as raking in the dough from all these new Belgian counties, which weakens Austria, so they can't really defend themselves against the expanding Ottomans, so they get puppeted, which means the Roman Empire now is majority Protestant outside of Bavaria. But Brandenburg-Prussia gets elected the new Protestant emperor as Frederick IV. Back in France, and they're still kind of having problems with the Catholics. Like in Brittany, who only joined France because the former Duchess married the King of France, and that line is extinct, and Henri's line only goes back up to St. Louis. Also up in the northeast, the Dukes of Guise, a very Catholic family, are upset, thus crowning themselves the Grand Dukes of Champagne. The stress of the two-front war eventually got to him, so he was succeeded by his son Louis XIV, known as the Moon King, due to his fascination with it. He was married to the daughter of Gustav Adolphus, Christina. The two were kind of friends, but they didn't really like each other as husband and wives, and they just had different opinions on things, so eventually got divorced, and Christina became Catholic again and moved to Rome. So Louis remarried to Elizabeth Charlotte, the princess of the Palatinate. France was seemingly on top of the world, being able to rival all of Western Europe, but interior there were still lots of Catholic problems. So Louis realized he needs to be somewhere where he's actually supported, so moved the court down to Vichy and had the Palace of Vichy constructed, as well as importing a lot of the Puritans from England who he found kinship in. Their plain Presbyterian Calvinist ideas really appealed to Louis, getting away from the debauchery of Paris and the Papist. And soon many nobles realized that these Huguenot Protestants were getting more and more privileges, so they started converting more and more to get closer to the king. So France became more and more Protestant via peaceful means by sucking up to the king, but also a little bit by force because he got tired of all their shenanigans, so had them more and more deported to the colonies, as well as a new important position to root out heresy.
Who's coming to get you, the witch, find your general?
'Tis Mardi Gras. These tipplers and revellers believe that they may indulge in sin today, for on the morrow they attend a papist mass, where they will be absolved for their evil-doing by a so-called priest. 'Tis not so. God determines the destiny of every soul ere they take fleshly inhabitation. And I say unto thee, these tipplers and revellers are surely bound for the fires of hell.
Meanwhile, in Spain, the very gross Charles II passed away with no heirs, so he tried getting his heir to be his relative Charles to bring back some honor to House Habsburg. But Louis saw opportunity because of who his mom was, so claimant he can use his grandkid to be the next king of Spain, starting the War of Spanish Succession. The Ottomans, not wanting their vassal in Austria to have so much power as the king of Spain, ended up siding with France, but they eventually settled on a compromise that Philip can be the king of Spain if he can be Catholic. Philip accepted this, saying the famous line that Madrid is worth a mass, which led to Louis disowning him. Louis had the longest confirmed reign of a modern king at 72 years. He wasn't succeeded by his son or his grandson, but his great-grandson, Louis XV. For 2 months, then he was succeeded by Francis III. And Francis of France was doing pretty well, but the British were kind of bankrupt from the Spanish War and then the 7 Years' War, so tried taxing and this led to war. So Francis funded this greatly to mess with the British, which created a lot of problems with his son Louis and his nephew Louis, which led to more war. After Napoleon, the monarchy was restored under the brother of Louis XVII, Robert III, or Robert III. He had no kids, so it went to his brother, Denis I, and he really didn't want to use the revolutionary flag, which upset everyone. So there was a possibility the monarchy would get overthrown again, so he just sucked it up, as well as sending aid to fellow Calvinists in Hungary getting independence from the Ottomans. So the throne passed to his son Louis XIX, who didn't have any kids. And it really sucked because his brother Robert died young. So Louis had to change the laws of so many years so women can actually inherit in France. So the throne passed to Robert's daughter, of course named Louise, the very first Queen of France, who was also co-monarch with Leopold I, her husband of House Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, or Gotha as everyone says. Despite being a very minor German noble family, it just took over the planet at this time. Now the King of France, as well as the Tsar of Bulgaria, King of Portugal, and King of the British. Louis and Leopold had a son, of course named Louis XX, who was king during a time when he tried invading Mexico with Spain and failed, the Crimean War, Prussia unifying Germany, and the scramble for Africa. He was succeeded by his famous nephew Francis IV, who was king during both World War I and II, and famously led troops in the trenches as well as in North Africa in World War II. He was succeeded by his unpopular son Louis XXI, who, unlike his dad, surrendered with France and was held in house arrest in the Palace of Vichy, so resigned the throne a few years later to his son, Denis II, insert a constitution that actually limits the king's authority. But Denis never had any kids, so the throne passed to his brother Pierre, or Peter I. Then to his son and the current king of France, Francis V. He's got 3 daughters, and before the birth of his 4th kid, he passed a right that all kids inherit equally, ironically right before he had his son named Gabriel. So his eldest kid, Daphne, is the Dauphine of France, or the heir apparent, the Dolphin. Technically, this family became House Coburg-Gotha, but just like Braganza stayed in Portugal, they kept their name of Bourbon. And those were the monarchs of House Bourbon. But let me know what you thought down below, as well as smashing the like button and the subscribe button if you're new.